we have not had the conventions. They haven't chosen the candidates, and sometimes you have to do extraordinary things, and I think that's what they're going to have to do.
Yeah, this is How to Win an Election, your insider's guide to the election. I'm Matt Chorley with your special Q&A session because we get so many questions from you. So during the election, we're doing bonus episodes, trying to answer as many of your questions as possible. This week, we've got Polly Mackenzie, Policy Mackenzie, former Director of Policy for Nick Clegg. Hello, Polly.
Morning, Matt.
And Tory Brainbox Daniel Finkelstein. Hello, Danny.
Good morning, Matt.
So if you want to send in your questions, howtowin@thetimes.co.uk is the email address, or you can WhatsApp 0333 003 2353. So if you were listening on Tuesday's episode, we had someone had re-recorded for our million download news. Someone had done the podcast theme sort of cinematically. It sounded like a sort of John Williams, Steven Spielberg thing. Lots of you saying it sounded like a Western. Well, we've had a new one, a new version of the theme. Hi, Polly, Matt, Danny and Peter. We're playing at the Belladrum Festival near Inverness next month. And so, given the well-documented Venn diagram intersection between Times reading politics fans and Northern Scottish bagpipe rock aficionados, it would really boost our reputation and likely crowd size if you could play our version of your theme tune. Thank you, Major Blowhard and the Windbags. And they say the bagpipes are hard listen. Danny, your views?
I thought that was magnificent. Alistair Campbell can play the bagpipes, but he can't do that, can he? So that's just one up for us, I think.
Polly?
I'm afraid I'm remote on a slightly defective device, so I heard nothing. I just saw the
you heard it very clearly.
Expressions on your faces, which looked like you were experiencing some digestive discomfort, shall we say.
No, on the contrary, I really did like it. It was great.
There's something, I don't know what it is about the bat, and this is no disrespect to Major Blowhard or indeed the Windbags, but I think it's because for years, walking across from Waterloo to Parliament, to go into work in Parliament every day, there was always someone playing the bagpipes. And I just thought, it's fine if you're doing it on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, but stop doing it here. But apparently I wasn't allowed to keep tipping into the Thames, so there we are. Right, anyway, let's focus on some other people seem to like the bagpipes. Right, let's focus on some actual questions then. This is the Q&A session. We've had this one in from Sue.
I was fortunate to be part of the live audience at the final debate between the two leaders and asked the very first question concerning two of the Nolan principles, honesty and integrity. Personally, I thought Keir Starmer just pipped it and came across as a tad more authentic. My specific question to all of you is, and I'm absolutely loving the podcast, by the way, how important do you think it is to be authentic in your delivery as a politician? And also, are there any other politicians, either past or present, whom you think presented as such?
Interesting. We've got a celebrity questioner. Sue was on the telly this week. What do you think about this question? How important is it to be authentic in your delivery? Polly?
Well, this is focused on delivery, right? I think there's also a question about authenticity around your agenda and your policy platform. But if we're just focused on how you communicate, I think it's vital to appear authentic. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to completely be, totally spontaneous, always speaking from the heart, bringing my whole self to work. Actually, there is an art of communications where you can sound like you are speaking authentically, like you are not robotically repeating statements that you've learned, that might nevertheless be statements you've learned. You know, Ronald Reagan, because he was an actor, is famed for this, of having off-the-cuff remarks, jokes, informality, that was all, in fact, pretty well rehearsed. And that's okay, right? Because actually the art of political communication does involve things like repetition and consistency, and it does mean you sometimes have to use language which works for your audience and isn't necessarily the words you would use for yourself. And given that communication is about the person experiencing it, not the person speaking, it's really important to do that. But if that translates into roboticism, as I think it usually does with Rishi Sunak, and sometimes I'm afraid does with Keir Starmer as well, it just makes you look peculiar.
Actually, Danny, I thought at the debate where Sue asked the question, of the two, Rishi Sunak seemed like the more animated. He'd got at least some fresh lines. He kept on delivering the same ones about surrender, but at least we hadn't sort of heard that before in the same way. And it was Keir Starmer who came across as robotic, and you know, all the dad was a toolmaker and all that stuff.
Well, his dad is a toolmaker, so his dad was a toolmaker, so that is authentic.
Yeah, so you can't keep changing that.
I mean, I think all the stuff about appearing authentic, I think it's almost impossible not to be authentic if you're a political performer often enough. And you know, certainly my opinion, both Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer come across pretty much when you watch them on television like they do when you talk to them. And I remember years ago when I was a student watching Cecil Parkinson, the Tory party chairman at the time, making a speech and thinking to myself, nobody could really be that smooth in real life. And years later, he became party chairman again, and I was one of the directors of Central Office with him, and he was indeed absolutely that smooth. And I loved him really as a person. So people generally give a reasonably good impression of what they're like. I think it's impossible not to. Polly's right, though, that there's a different matter when it comes to saying what you really think. Now, that is a bit more difficult because you are playing a team game. So, for example, you had Anne Widdecombe on earlier. When I worked with her, she always entirely said what she thought, but it wasn't actually that helpful for everybody else who had to share the shadow cabinet and responsibility with her, but perhaps didn't share her style or sensibilities or political views, and it led to real difficulties for the leadership. But, you know, so authenticity in her case, she certainly was authentic in her views. Ken Clarke did exactly the same in the 97 general election on the issue of Europe, but we were trying to hold a line that kept together more people than just him. So sometimes people can be authentic, but it's a sort of form of selfishness. Yes, it's certainly true that you communicate yourself and everyone's very impressed that you've said exactly what you think. But you're trying to give a line on behalf of everybody who shares the team with you, and you're in a coalition, you're in an alliance, and you can't always just please yourself with what you say. But in terms of authenticity of style, I think almost everybody is pretty much what they're like.
It's interesting that because actually, where we've seen people, you know, be praised for their authenticity or their honesty, there are quite often been elected mayors, whether it's Boris Johnson in London, Andy Burnham in Greater Manchester, but they have the luxury of not having to play in the team in quite the same way. Given this is called How to Win Election, and it's not only the UK election which is happening this year, and given this unfolded overnight, was Joe Biden too authentically an 81-year-old man?
Move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
What did you make of it, Danny?
Well, I'm afraid I thought it was calamitous for Joe Biden. And as I hold it as incredibly important that the Democrats win the election in the United States, not as a sort of general party matter, because I think Donald Trump is a narcissist and somebody who doesn't respect for the rule of law. I was very concerned about it, and I think it's been possible. I've had this argument with friends before, because Joe Biden has clearly had his faculties about him in dealing with the issues that come before the presidency. And because I've got no doubt that even with impaired faculties, he'd be a better president than Donald Trump. It's possible to ignore the fact that you cannot win an election when you can't, finish a sentence properly on a regular basis. If people didn't have in mind that he may be impaired in that way, it wouldn't have been so much of a problem. But because he went into that debate with everyone saying the crucial thing he's got to do is prove that he is vital and on it and, coherent, and he did basically the opposite of that, I think the Democrats have really got to revisit their candidacy.
I mean, it's pretty extraordinary that, though, trying to change your candidate mid-campaign.
He hasn't been nominated yet.
No,
I mean, he
that's
hasn't. He has not yet. We have not had the conventions. They haven't chosen the candidates, and sometimes you have to do extraordinary things, and I think that's what they're going to have to do.
Polly?
I agree with everything Danny has said. There was a question in the Keir Starmer-Rishi Sunak debate around, sort of slightly snarky question, like basically, why are the two of you so rubbish? What's wrong with our politics that this is the best we've got? But that question felt to me, the question that needed to be asked after that debate. There is something profoundly wrong with American politics that has elevated just these two men as the only options presented. And the problem with diagnosing faults in your political system is that the only people who can fix them are the people at the top of that system, and the people who get to the top of the system are the people who can thrive in the system as it is. And that's why democracy is, in a way, a sort of not a self-improving mechanism. You have to find somebody who is able to navigate a broken system and yet also has the clarity, the moral compass to fix that system, even if it might mean pulling up a sort of ladder of opportunity for people who are like them. I don't know when we will get to that crisis point, but it seems to me incredibly urgent.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see if indeed they do remove. I mean, absolutely extraordinary, but then we're pretty used to American politics being extraordinary.
By the way, I think a really important feature of this election is that in Britain, we concentrate a lot on the way that Donald Trump serves a Republican Party we struggle to understand from inside the British system because it's so unbelievably American. If you go to Wyoming, you see people who would never think of anything other than supporting Donald Trump, and it's almost part of their identity in a way that we can't understand. What this debate showed, and what the choice of Joe Biden shows, the reason they've chosen Joe Biden is they don't feel they've got anybody else who can win the presidency against Donald Trump, and that's because the Democrats themselves now contain a large portion of people who've also gone off the political reservation, and we sometimes miss that because it's a kind of politics that we at least can understand from inside the British political system. It's its failings are a bit more European, I guess. And I think we may be missing the real story as to why Donald Trump is still a viable candidate and will probably win unless the Democrats do something.
Really, really interesting that. Now, because I'm a Democrat, I might not have liked the Bagpipes, but you all really like the Bagpipes. Deeksy says, I know, Don says, the new version of the podcast music is wonderful, a proper Kaylee. I can imagine people dancing energetically to that. Mark says the theme tune on the Jocko balloon was fab. The Bagpipes remix was the best yet, says Kirsty. Top marks them, says Ross. Oh, this is brilliant, says Lorraine. Hashtag goosebumps. And then Deeksy says, the Bagpipes are the Scottish breathalyzer. When you find yourself enjoying the sound of the bagpipes, you are then drunk. Happy Friday, chaps. So let's take a break, but we'll go into the break with the spine-tingling sounds of Major Blowhard and the Windbags. We've had this from Jeff in Bun Hill.
So imagine your party has just suffered a record defeat after 14 years in government. The recriminations have begun already and will certainly continue for some time. You aspire to be the next leader of this crumbling party. But how do you play it the morning after? Do you join the siren voices in a bid to establish a leadership position right away? Or do you remain quiet, plan, and wait for the right moment to strike?
Total hypothetical question, this one, of course. But if hypothetically a political party was thrown out of power after 14 years, in the next week or so, and you wanted to be the new leader, what would you do? Let's start with you, Polly.
Option number 2, just, wheeshed. It was interesting. I saw Gavin Newsom.
So what did you say then, Polly? Wheeshed?
It's a Scottish word.
Okay.
I was.
Sorry,
we've
this isn't called How to Win a Scottish Election.
I mean, shush. It's like the Scottish version of shush.
Okay.
My dad is Scottish. My stepmother's Scottish.
Some
This
of
feels like
some of your best friends are bagpipes.
yeah, something like that. Gavin Newsom, who is the Democrat governor of somewhere or other, Danny probably knows, was on TV responding to the Biden sort of catastrophe last night and giving a robust defense of him and his agenda and being absolutely kind of forward leaning about being a team player. And that's probably because he's thinking about maybe he could be the candidate, and that's what you need to do. Stay out of the limelight. You can use your proxies to go forward, but the person who's sort of first to complain, first to wield the knife, any of that is never the successful.
I don't even need to really remember the details of 1997, Danny, but I imagine it wasn't William Hague first out of the traps after polling day.
No, I mean, I was standing next to William Hague in Conservative Central Office, actually, when Michael Portillo lost his seat. And I think I looked at him and he looked at me, and I think both of us knew what that probably meant for him and becoming leader of the Conservative Party, which obviously ultimately is what happened. Yes, you would want to be discreet, but it will be quite difficult simply because the question of what to do about Nigel Farage will come, and I think you probably will need to have a position on that. And that will definitely be something that will then be considerable in the leadership competition. So lots of people in the Conservative Party will not wish to support a leader who was open to Nigel Farage coming into the Conservative Party. And if you want those people to support you, you probably have to take that stance right at the beginning. So you probably do need to know where you stand on that, because it's likely you'll be asked that, even if your general stance is that you won't comment on leadership questions. And you can hold that stance mostly. Look, when you look at leadership elections, most leadership candidates try and position themselves post the argument, right? They try, like Tony Blair did, it was sort of post the argument of left versus right in the Labour Party from the 1980s, or Theresa May was trying to position herself as post-Brexit argument, even though that then turned out to be unsuccessful when actually Prime Minister. So you try and position yourself. William Hague was trying to position himself as post that argument too. So yeah, that's what you'll try to do. But I think it will be a bit difficult on this specific question about Nigel Farage, because quite a lot of people in the Conservative Party will be looking for some clarity and leadership on that, and wouldn't be that impressed by someone who didn't know their own mind on it.
So this week we've had Victoria Atkins, the Health Secretary, not ruling out a leadership race when asked about it. She said, I'm not entertaining any questions about my leadership, she said. Kemi Badenoch's done similar things. Steve Baker's gone slightly further. So he's the Northern Ireland minister, and he's already announced that at what I think was a private event, which unfortunately for him is leaked, that he will launch a bid to replace Rishi Sunak after the election, if he holds his seat, of course. So he's doing actually the exact opposite of what you suggested, Polly.
Well, it's Steve Baker, isn't it? He likes to defy rules. So I was once sat next to Steve Baker in the Newsnight studio, and he showed me on his phone some YouTube videos of some American coffee company, something like Black Rifle, where they advertise their coffee by shooting guns and looking at semi-naked women. I also remember speaking on a panel with Steve Baker where he stood up and said, I'm not one of those people who believes that all tax is theft and it should be abolished, as if this sort of pitched him as a centrist moderate. So, he likes to defy the rules and the boundaries. And I guess maybe that will be the vibe after the election, someone different.
Yeah, first move with advantage.
I don't want to be as different as that, Polly.
You don't buy the right kind of coffee.
When we said think the unthinkable, we didn't mean that.
Let's say we had a conversation before about authenticity, and Steve Baker, who is a very, very nice person to talk to, and I think very moral, and he has a clear idea of what he thinks about things, and he then tries to say them the whole time. But it's an outlier in terms of national opinion, in my view, where he stands, and he makes a difficult colleague because he, is only guided by what his own particular, fairly niche politics is, and I think you can't be a political leader doing that. So, and being a kind of political leader and being, like I am, a commentator, those are different roles. And Steve Baker combines those things. He just says whatever he feels like, and without any consideration for whether anyone else agrees with him or regards that as, a sensible or collegiate thing. And it has been immensely destructive because it's made the despite the fact that I don't think he's a destructive individual, it has been an immensely destructive form of behaviour. All these groups and pressurising, and getting rid of leaders and all that sort of stuff, and having leaders that had to be got rid of, the combination of those things has been pretty cataclysmic for a party that's lasted as long as the Conservative Party has, and maybe about to get its worst result in its entire existence.
Well, on that bombshell, let's move away from the self-styled Brexit hardman. We've had a message in from Chris. You remember Chris in Barnet? He's been in touch. Matt, Polly, Danny and Peter. Every time I hear a new recording of the podcast theme, I get a nice warm feeling inside, given that I first got that ball rolling with my head banging all that time ago. I never in a million years would have imagined it would have unleashed all this amazing creativity. Well done, me. Well, in that case, Chris, you have got to own our final submission that someone called La 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 has sent in to us with the subject line, "A new podcast is broken, has it not?" I've been tormenting the office by playing that.
That ending was a bit like one of Joe Biden's sentences.
Polly, will you be updating that as your ringtone?
No. My husband, who spent a lot of time listening to club music in his 20s, definitely wouldn't be able to hear most of it.
And all the better for it. All the better for it. Well, of course, it comes nowhere near your husband's version by Morrissey or indeed Barry White. If you want to get in touch, you can email us howtowin@thetimes.co.uk. Howtowin@thetimes.co.uk. If you want to get in touch, either because you've got a sensible question or you want the sheet music so you can re-record the theme tune. That was How to Win Election with Daniel Finkelstein and Polly Mackenzie. We'll be back on Tuesday, and then we'll be back again on Times Radio Live, 11 o'clock on election night, 11 p.m, and then again 11 a.m. on Friday, July the 5th, as we finally find out who's worked out how to win an election. How to Win an Election, wherever you get your podcasts from.